When someone pulls away, it's natural to wonder if they'll ever come back. Especially when dealing with avoidant personalities, their mixed signals can leave you questioning everything. But the truth is, their actions reveal more than their words ever will. If you notice these signs, it's not about holding on to false hope. It's about recognizing the reality so you can protect your heart and move forward with clarity. When someone stops engaging in meaningful conversations, it speaks volumes about where they are emotionally, because conversation is not just about exchanging words, it is about connecting, sharing, and letting someone into your world. In the early stages of a relationship, or even during difficult times, communication is the bridge that keeps two people tethered together. When that bridge is burned or left uncared for, you start to feel the distance widening. And in the case of an avoidant, it becomes even more noticeable because they already have a tendency to pull back when intimacy starts to feel threatening. The silence they offer is not just about needing space. It is a silence that begins to suffocate the connection. You start noticing that where there used to be long talks, now there are short replies. Where there used to be curiosity about your day, now there is indifference. This absence of conversation leaves you questioning yourself, wondering if you did something wrong, but in truth, it is their way of detaching from the bond that once mattered to them. When an avoidant no longer engages in meaningful dialogue, it is not just about the words they withhold, but the emotional investment that is missing. You may try to initiate conversations, and they may give you surface-level answers that sound polite but feel hollow, as though they are only engaging enough to keep up appearances. The depth that used to be present is gone, and it feels like you are speaking into an empty room, hoping for echoes that never return. This behavior is one of the clearest signs they are not coming back, because real connection requires participation from both sides, and once one person stops showing up emotionally, the foundation begins to crack. The absence of meaningful conversation is not a neutral act. It is an active withdrawal, even if it appears passive on the surface. It is them creating a gap so wide that even if you reach across, there is no hand waiting on the other side. Over time, this lack of communication starts to affect you deeply. You might find yourself overthinking every word, analyzing every silence, wondering if you should say less, say more, or say nothing at all. The truth is, when someone wants to be there, you never have to beg them to talk to you. Words flow naturally, emotions are shared willingly, and curiosity about your life becomes a natural part of theirs. When that disappears, it is because the desire to connect is no longer there. For an avoidant, pulling back on conversations is a way to protect themselves from closeness. But when it reaches the point where they no longer care to talk at all, it is not just self-protection anymore. It is a sign that they have mentally moved away from the relationship. They no longer see value in letting you into their inner world, and once you are locked out, it is incredibly difficult to be let back in. You may even test this by sharing something vulnerable or meaningful, something that would normally open the door to a deep exchange, only to be met with silence or a dismissive response. That reaction is not about you being unworthy of a reply, but about them choosing not to step into emotional territory. For someone who is still invested, a vulnerable moment from you would draw them closer, would spark curiosity, empathy, or at least engagement. But when that spark is gone, your words fall flat because they are no longer willing to meet you halfway. This is one of the most painful realities to face, because silence can feel harsher than anger, and detachment can cut deeper than conflict. Conflict at least shows that they still care enough to fight, but silence shows they no longer care enough to even try. What makes this sign so powerful is how consistent it becomes once it sets in. At first, you may notice gaps in conversation, then shorter replies, then less interest, and eventually an almost complete absence of genuine dialogue. It is not a sudden disappearance, but a gradual erosion, and that erosion tells you more than any words could. Someone who is invested will always find reasons to talk, while someone who has checked out will always find reasons not to. It is easy to confuse their silence with busyness, distraction, or even a temporary need for space, but when you look closer, the pattern reveals itself. They are no longer interested in sharing themselves with you. And that absence of sharing is the clearest indicator that they are not planning to return. When someone makes no effort to rebuild the connection, it is one of the clearest signals that their heart is no longer invested, because relationships are not sustained by perfection. They are sustained by repair. Every bond will go through conflict, misunderstanding, or periods of distance. But what keeps people together is their willingness to come back to the table, to try again, to work through the cracks instead of pretending they do not exist. When an avoidant partner reaches the point where they no longer put in that effort, it is not just laziness or distraction, it is a conscious decision to let the relationship dissolve without a fight. You notice it in the little ways first, like them not apologizing after a hurtful moment, brushing off tension instead of addressing it, or minimizing your concerns instead of trying to soothe them. What feels small at the start grows into something heavy, because over time, the lack of effort becomes a wall that blocks you out completely. For someone who still cares, effort is not about grand gestures. It is about consistent attempts to meet you in the middle. Even when they are avoidant, if they value the bond, they will eventually come back around, maybe not perfectly, but with some sign of wanting to mend what was broken. They will reach out, clarify, or at least show remorse for letting distance grow. When those signs disappear altogether, you are left with silence where there used to be repair, and that silence speaks louder than any argument could. An avoidant who is finished will not fight to rebuild, because in their mind, stepping away feels easier and safer than stepping closer. They convince themselves that putting in effort would be pointless, and so they withdraw not only from conflict but from the very idea of reconnection. This lack of effort can also show up in how they respond to your attempts. You may try to have conversations about what went wrong, hoping to bridge the gap, but instead of meeting you halfway, they deflect, change the subject, or respond with indifference. They no longer invest emotional energy in finding solutions, and instead, they make you feel like you are the only one carrying the responsibility for the relationship. That imbalance is exhausting because connection cannot survive on the effort of one person alone. Over time, you begin to realize that your attempts are falling on deaf ears, and that realization can be more painful than the initial conflict. It is not just that they do not want to fix things. It is that they no longer believe the relationship is worth fixing. Another way this sign reveals itself is through consistency, or rather the lack of it. When someone is invested, even if they pull back momentarily, they circle back because the bond matters to them. They want to restore peace, they want to repair the damage, they want to know that you are okay. But when the effort is gone, the inconsistency becomes permanent. Days pass, weeks pass, sometimes months, and there is no sign of them reaching out to rebuild. Instead, life carries on for them as if the relationship was never a priority, and you are left holding on to memories of effort that no longer exist. The more time that passes without action, the clearer it becomes that their silence is not temporary. It is a reflection of their choice to stop investing. This is often one of the hardest truths to accept, because love makes us want to believe that effort can be reignited, that if we just hold on a little longer, they will come back with the energy they once had. But when an avoidant decides not to rebuild, their detachment is not accidental. It is their way of closing the chapter quietly, without dramatic exits, without final speeches, just through the simple refusal to try. It is in their lack of initiative, their refusal to pick up the phone, their silence after conflict, their absence when you need reassurance. They may still be physically around, but emotionally they have already left, and the absence of effort is the evidence of that departure. It is also important to understand that rebuilding is never about one big moment. It is in the daily choices someone makes to keep showing up, to keep trying, even when it is hard. When those daily choices disappear, the relationship loses its lifeline. You may still hope for one big gesture to prove their commitment, but gestures without consistency mean nothing. The true proof of investment is in effort that continues, especially after things break down. So when you notice that they have stopped putting in that effort altogether, when they no longer try to understand you, reassure you, or close the distance, what you are really witnessing is their silent decision to let the relationship end. When someone shows indifference to your presence or absence, It is one of the most painful and undeniable indicators that they are no longer emotionally connected, because human beings naturally respond to the people who matter to them. When someone values you, they notice when you are not around, they feel the gap when you step away, and they light up when you come back into their space. Indifference is the opposite of that, and it is not just about a lack of words. It is about the absence of energy, the lack of any reaction that shows you still hold weight in their life. At first, you may notice it in subtle ways, like them no longer asking where you have been, no longer noticing changes in your mood, or failing to check in when you go quiet. Over time, it becomes obvious that your presence does not move them, and your absence does not create any emptiness in their world. That shift is devastating because it tells you that in their emotional landscape, you have already been erased from the center. This indifference is not the same as someone being busy or distracted, because even when life is full, people who care still find ways to show that you matter. They remember to check in, they apologize if they miss something important, and they make it clear that your place in their life is secure. But when indifference sets in, it feels like you have become invisible, as if your existence no longer holds meaning for them. That lack of response becomes louder than any words, because when someone truly no longer cares whether you stay or go, it tells you that they have emotionally disconnected. For someone with avoidant tendencies, detachment often begins slowly. But when it reaches the point of indifference, it means they have crossed a threshold where closeness no longer feels worth their energy. You may find yourself testing this without even meaning to. You might withdraw slightly, hoping they will notice and reach out, only to find that they do not. You may go quiet for hours, days, or even longer, and instead of them checking in, you are met with silence. When you return, there is no recognition that you are gone, no warmth in welcoming you back, no curiosity about where you were or how you felt. That silence from them is not just absence of action. It is confirmation that your presence does not make a difference in their life anymore. It is one of the hardest realities to accept because love often makes us believe that deep down they must care, but caring is always visible in some form. And when it disappears completely, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Indifference can also show itself when they stop celebrating your highs or supporting you through your lows. Where once they may have cheered for your wins or comforted you in your struggles, now they respond with neutrality or even nothing at all. This is not about them being cold temporarily. It is about them having lost the desire to be emotionally present in your life. When someone truly cares, they cannot help but react to your emotions, because connection makes them feel invested in your well-being. When they no longer care enough to respond, it means they have created a wall between you and their heart. You can sense that wall in every interaction, as though your presence barely registers, and your absence leaves no mark. What makes this so painful is that indifference erases the sense of significance you once felt in the relationship. It makes you question your own worth, as though you no longer matter. But the truth is, indifference is not about your value. It is about their choice to disengage. Someone who is emotionally invested will always show interest, even when hurt, because love makes people responsive. Indifference, on the other hand, is a sign that they have emotionally checked out and no longer feel the need to connect. This is why it is such a powerful indicator that they are not coming back, because someone who is capable of ignoring your presence and unaffected by your absence has already built a life that does not include you in its emotional core. Over time, this indifference begins to shift the dynamic of the relationship completely. You may find yourself working harder to get their attention, raising your voice, reaching out more, or trying to provoke some kind of reaction just to confirm that you still matter. But instead of drawing them closer, these efforts are often met with further distance, because for someone who has already detached, the more you push, the more they retreat. This imbalance leaves you feeling as though you are carrying the weight of the relationship alone, while they stand on the outside, unaffected by whether it continues or collapses. The truth is, when someone truly loves you, your presence matters deeply and your absence is felt. But when indifference replaces care, the bond is no longer alive. When someone begins to invest emotionally in other people or things, it becomes a powerful sign that the space you once held in their heart is being replaced. And this shift does not happen overnight. It happens gradually, with subtle clues that become clearer over time. At first, you may notice them spending more time with friends, colleagues, or even new acquaintances. And while having connections outside the relationship is healthy, what hurts is the level of emotional energy they give to those people compared to you. You begin to notice that they share their thoughts, laughter, and stories with others while leaving you out of those exchanges. Where they once confided in you about their day, their struggles, or their dreams. Now you hear about those things secondhand or not at all because their emotional investment has been redirected. This is not about them needing harmless distractions. It is about them building new emotional anchors that no longer include you. The change becomes especially clear when you realize that the effort and excitement they use to bring into your connection has been poured elsewhere. They might light up when talking about a new hobby, a group of people they have grown close to, or even work projects that suddenly consume all of their attention, while appearing detached or indifferent when interacting with you. It is not wrong for someone to have passions, but the imbalance reveals itself when those passions become their escape from the intimacy of the relationship. Avoidants often struggle with closeness, and when they are no longer willing to put effort into the bond, they redirect that energy to places that feel safer and less vulnerable. Investing emotionally in something or someone else becomes their way of replacing the intimacy they no longer want to cultivate with you. You may feel this shift most strongly in the way they prioritize their time. Where once they made space for you, now you find yourself at the bottom of their list. Plans with others take precedence. Long conversations with friends come easily to them, but when it comes to you, there is little left to give. They may even defend this shift by claiming they are just busy or that they need balance. But deep down, you sense that what is really happening is a withdrawal from the emotional partnership you shared. You feel the gap growing, not just in time, but in emotional weight. Because they are not just choosing new activities, they are choosing to pour their feelings, thoughts, and energy somewhere else instead of into the relationship. This can also show up in how they seek comfort and validation. In the past, you may have been the one they leaned on during hard times, the one they confided in when things got tough. But now you notice that they seek that comfort elsewhere. It could be through friends, through communities, or through constant busyness that keeps them from ever turning to you. That shift in emotional reliance is not just a change of habit, it is a sign of emotional detachment. They are building a world that does not need you in it, a world where their needs for connection, support, and fulfillment are being met outside of what you once shared. That is not simply distance, it is replacement. And once an avoidant has redirected their emotional investment, it is incredibly difficult to bring them back to the bond they left behind. What makes this so painful is the sense of being excluded from their inner life. You might hear them laughing with others in ways they no longer laugh with you, or watch them enthusiastically plan activities and conversations with new people while barely acknowledging your attempts to connect. It creates a deep feeling of invisibility, as though the intimacy you once shared has been outsourced. You cannot help but notice the energy they give elsewhere, because it is the same energy that used to be directed toward you, and its absence leaves you feeling the emptiness even more strongly. When someone invests emotionally in others, it is not just about their attention, it is about their heart choosing a new place to land, and that choice reveals a painful truth about where you now stand in their life. Over time, this shift solidifies into a new pattern. They no longer come to you for advice, no longer seek your comfort, and no longer feel compelled to share their wins or their struggles with you. Instead, you are left with surface-level exchanges, while the depth of their emotional life plays out somewhere else. This erosion of intimacy is not accidental. It is deliberate in its avoidance of vulnerability with you. For someone who has already decided they are not coming back, this emotional redirection is both a symptom and a confirmation of that decision. By pouring themselves into other people or pursuits, they create a buffer that prevents them from needing the bond they once had with you. And as much as it hurts, noticing where they choose to place their emotional energy tells you everything you need to know about where you now stand in their life. When communication only happens when absolutely necessary, it is one of the clearest signs that the connection is no longer alive, because communication is not simply about exchanging information, it is about maintaining a bond, checking in, creating closeness, and showing care. When someone reduces it to nothing more than functional updates, logistical exchanges, or practical necessities, it reveals how much they have detached emotionally. You begin to notice that the warmth is gone, the spontaneity is gone, and the willingness to share just for the sake of closeness has disappeared. They no longer reach out to ask how your day was. They no longer send a message just to connect. They only speak when they must, and even then, the tone is short, transactional, and stripped of any intimacy. This is not the same as someone being busy or distracted for a short time, because even in those seasons, people who care find ways to reach out and remind you that you matter. Here, the silence is consistent, deliberate, and it becomes clear that they are no longer interested in communicating with you beyond what is required. For an avoidant, communication has always been a delicate balance, because closeness often triggers their discomfort. But even with that, when they care, they find ways to engage, even if imperfectly. They may pull back, but they circle back. They may need space, but they eventually want to reconnect. The moment communication shrinks to only what is absolutely necessary, it signals that they are not circling back anymore, they are choosing to disengage permanently. That lack of effort is not about needing a break. It is about no longer feeling that there is value in maintaining a bond with you. It feels like you are no longer a person they want to connect with, but rather an obligation they respond to when circumstances force them to. You may notice this shift in the way conversations change, where once you could share stories, jokes, or dreams, now the dialogue has been reduced to the bare minimum. They only respond when asked something direct, and even then the answers feel clipped, rushed, or indifferent. They stop initiating altogether, and when you do reach out, it often feels like you are imposing, as though your presence in their inbox or on their phone is unwelcome. Over time, you start to hesitate before sending a message or making a call, because you can already anticipate the coldness or brevity of their response. This hesitation is not about you being too needy. It is about them no longer offering the emotional openness that used to make communication a joy. This silence is also felt in the absence of reassurance. In healthy connections, even during conflict or distance, there is usually some form of communication that says, I still care, I still want this, I still see you. But when communication shrinks to necessity only, that reassurance disappears. They no longer feel compelled to soothe your worries, no longer care to clarify misunderstandings, and no longer think about how their silence might affect you. It is a form of emotional neglect that tells you where you stand, not through words, but through the absence of them. And in many ways, that absence hurts more than anger or arguments ever could, because at least anger shows that there is still passion left. Silence shows that they have stopped investing altogether. Another painful aspect of this shift is that it often forces you to carry the burden of trying to maintain some sense of connection. You may find yourself initiating more often, trying to fill the silence, sending long messages that receive short replies, or reaching out repeatedly only to feel the weight of their disinterest. The imbalance grows heavier because connection cannot be sustained on one person's effort alone. Over time, the exhaustion sets in because no matter how much you try to keep the lines open, they continue to close them down, making it clear that they no longer want to participate in keeping the bond alive. Their communication has become purely functional, and that functionality is the clearest sign that their heart is no longer in it. This detachment is not only about words, but about presence. Even when you do communicate, it feels like they are somewhere else entirely. Their responses lack emotion, their voice carries no warmth, and their attention feels divided, as though speaking to you is something they have to get through, rather than something they want to engage in. This lack of presence makes the communication even more painful because it reminds you that they are not just physically distant, they are emotionally absent as well. You feel the void in every word left unsaid, in every silence that stretches too long, in every conversation that feels more like an obligation than a choice.